Hi, I'm Mike Papantonio, and this is America's Lawyer. The Department of Justice recently announced a $3 billion fine against the 10th largest bank in the country after they pleaded guilty to laundering money for drug cartels. But the fine is nothing compared to the money they've made off this scam for 10 years. The FBI is conducting an investigation into one of the most popular corporate bankruptcy judges in America after he resigned disgraced following a massive sex scandal that may have corrupted countless rulings. And a popular birth control that's used by over 70 million women each year has been linked to an increasing risk of developing potential fatal brain tumors. But the company behind the product hasn't been honest about it. They've known about it for decades. All that and more, it's coming up. Don't go anywhere. America's Lawyer starts right now. Attorney General Merrick Garland recently held a press conference to boast about a massive fine that the DOJ has leveled against one of the largest banks in the country. The bank pleaded guilty to laundering money for drug cartels in a scheme that lasted for an entire decade. I've got Ring of Fire's Farron Cousins with me to talk about it. Well, first of all, I look at this story, I said, well, God bless Merrick Garland. He actually did something. But when I really look into what he did, it's the same old thing. They caught these people washing money for drug cartels that, of course, are involved in human trafficking, drug cartels, terrorism. These are cases we're handling in this law firm, so I know a lot about this. And it's just like the HSBC case, where Eric Holder fined the bank $1.6 billion and nobody went to prison. Nobody. We know everybody in the bank who participated in this money laundering that resulted in the expansion of drug cartels, expansion of human trafficking, expansion of terrorism all over the world.
Deaths. I mean, people are dead because of what takes place with bringing in the fentanyl. That's one of the things these drug cartels were doing. With this money, we're going to bring in fentanyl into this country that, of course, is just killing people at an alarming rate. But Garland, I actually caught the press conference on Twitter when it happened.
Name it is TD Bank.
TD Bank, yeah. It's the 10th largest bank in the country, but it's based out of Canada. So I watched this press conference, and you would think that Merrick Garland just did a combination of re-killing Osama bin Laden and winning the Powerball because he was just like, this was the greatest day of his life. Look at this. I got the bad guys, and they're going to pay me money.
Yeah,
and that's it. That's all that's going to happen.
They're going to pay me money, and the criminals that did all this, because they're dressed up in suits, they're dressed up in Armani suits, none of them are going to go to prison. If anybody else did this, they would be in prison for the rest of their lives. Merrick Garland, will prosecute nobody that is a white-collar criminal. Did everybody know about the bank employees used to joke about it? That's how long this was going on. Bank employees made fun of it. Yeah, we're involved in a crime syndicate, right?
Right, and you have plenty of the lower level bank employees, not the people at the top, but these lower level employees that were getting kickbacks from the cartels that essentially bribe money. So Garland says, well, maybe some of the lower people, maybe some of them will prosecute. I think they identified maybe three or four
or five of them,
just a handful, but definitely not the guys at the top. These are just, the bank tellers. Some of these folks that are going to go down for this, when it was all the way at the top. It always flows from the top.
Bharat Masrani. We're going to have to make sure we get a picture of Bharat Masrani. He's the CEO of the company. Now, here's what he said. We've taken full responsibility for these failures. We simply didn't know what was going on. I apologize. It took place on my watch. This guy will never go to prison because the banking industry gives so damn much money to the Democrats and the Republicans that they won't throw these people in prison. But they're going to find somebody to throw in prison. But you understand, with the terrorism case, the terrorism part of this, they don't talk about it, but it went on. The terrorism part is where the bank would wash money for terrorist groups, right? We're handling thousands of those cases all over the world where we can actually trace the money that came to the bank, what organization did the money go to, where did that organization Islamic organization. Where did they operate? What part of the world did they operate in? We can trace the money right to the roadside bomb.
Yeah.
And so, and by the way, we've gotten very little help from the Department of Justice. Very little help. Very little help from the Department of Defense. Almost none. And so this is just protection, isn't it? It's a Bank Secrecy Act that they violated forever. I just wrote a book on this, by the way.
Yeah.
It's called Suspicious Activity, and it's fiction, but it's based on this scenario.
Yeah.
I think the reason the book's selling so well is people, they have no idea this is going on. And then all of a sudden they start seeing this happens right down the street.
Yeah, this is obviously not the first bank that's been caught doing this. It probably won't be the last bank caught doing this either. And the reason for that, as you've said, 100 times, is because nobody that's in charge here is going to go to jail. Even some of those lower level people, if they end up, getting convicted, if it even goes to trial, they'll probably cut plea deals. You'll never hear about it again.
Right.
But if they go to trial, they will get very light sentences, or they'll end up just being the fall guy for it. None of the big guys get any kind of accountability.
There's a lot of reasons for it. First of all, it involves money going in political campaigns. Second of all, it involves with the way the Department of Justice works. They have lifetime people there, okay? This is all they've done their entire life. They don't have to do anything extraordinary to keep their job. So if something's really difficult, or even mildly difficult, they're not going to do anything. They're going to declare a victory because they got a big fine, even though because of this, in MBA schools all over the world, they're already teaching kids how to do this kind of thing and get away with it. And so, we don't change anything, do we? I mean, it's a cultural issue. We don't change a thing.
Yeah, and people may think, oh, well, they've got to pay back $3 billion. Do you know how much money, they could have potentially made in 10 years of doing this? I mean, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars in profit off of this. $3 billion is a drop in the bucket that they will never do. It's a cost of doing business.
Merrick Garland is such a bonehead.
Yeah.
And we followed every story the guy's done. Every time we do a story, I just scratch my head and say, really? We can't do any better than that as Attorney General of the United States.
Well, no matter who the next president is, a week from now, if we find out,
they've got to get
he's got to go immediately.
Yeah, for sure. The FBI is conducting an investigation into one of the most popular corporate bankruptcy judges in America after he resigned in disgrace following a massive sex scandal that may have corrupted countless rulings. Now, we did a story on this. The reason this story is so important, and the reason I think the story we did last time got like 250,000 views because people are saying, this is really happening in America? Really? So this man, Jones, had a sexual relationship with a woman named Elizabeth Freeman. As a matter of fact, they owned what I call a love shack together. They were paying for this love shack, a house together, and he never discloses that to anybody who appears in front of him. The people who appear in front of him are corporate America, who are trying to get away with making sure creditors don't get paid, that the CEOs don't lose any money, that they keep most of their money and the creditors just go to hell. Right?
Yeah, and Elizabeth Freeman, what her job was essentially was, hey, I'm going to go with my firm and we're going to recruit these businesses all over the country and tell them, come and file your bankruptcy case down here in Houston in front of Jones. And then after she did that with the law firm she was working with for several years, she then started her own firm. And she partners up with big-time law firms like Kirkland Ellis.
Biggest in the world.
Yeah, and says, Kirkland, you got to come down here to this, not just this jurisdiction, this guy.
Judge.
He became the busiest bankruptcy judge in the world because of all the cases she was bringing in. And of course, never disclosed that, she's getting a kickback from the firms for bringing them here. He, of course, is just ruling for corporations with every slap of that gavel. And it's this massive corruption taking place in Texas, but extending throughout the entire country.
Wall Street Journal reports that the lawyers at Kirkland Ellis, the huge firm, would bring Freeman in. They know about the relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, they deny that they know, but there's people that said, well, hell yeah.
There's text messages and all kinds of fun
stuff. There's a lot of stuff
too.
that says, yes, we knew that he was having sex with Freeman and they owned the love shack together. And all he had to do is rubber stamp everything Kirkland Ellis asked him to do. And so but what's interesting to me, if this was any other Department of Justice, I'd be really encouraged because the Department of Justice really is doing a massive investigation. And it goes on. He had a sidekick, Marvin Isger. What was Marvin Isger's role? He had a panel. It was him and Marvin Isger, who's another bankruptcy judge, who was supposed to, they were supposed to handle all the complex cases that would come in front of them, which are the big corporate cases. And so this fellow named Van Deelen, he goes in front of him and he sees what's going on. And he says, you need to disclose this relationship that you're having sex with this woman who is up here arguing on behalf of the corporation to my detriment, right? Yeah. And all this starts to unfold. And tell me about the ramifications as you see it.
Well, right now, as you mentioned, you do have the FBI that is conducting an investigation here. But so far, Jones, he resigned maybe a year ago. But when he resigned, this was a small thing that only the people like the Van Deelen exposing this.
Right.
It was just the people in the court that kind of knew what had happened. He would still be on this bench today had he not been called out. But then ProPublica got a hold of this story.
Great job they did on it.
They're the best in the country. And they exposed this. The Wall Street Journal, to their credit, dug even deeper and found all this. Like I said, the text messages, we've got the internal communications where these firms are almost joking.
Partners in the Kirkland Ellis firm communicating about the backstory in this with the judge.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got just more evidence that I don't even know what else they're still investigating at this point.
It's leading to other people.
Yeah.
It's leading to other people in the system, other judges who might have known about it and kept their mouth shut. It might have been other clerks who knew about it but kept their mouth shut. That's a furtherance of the wrongdoing here. It's really almost a classic RICO case to me.
Yeah.
Because there's this whole chain of people that are involved.
Well, what worries me is, like you said, this DOJ is terrible, and they are. So if they're the ones that do the case, I don't have hope. But if we were to get a prosecutor in Texas, I have even less hope. Because Texas is so corrupt as it is, I don't think they would even do it.
Yeah, we've been asked to get involved in a couple of cases involving. What I find most interesting about this, as we're looking into it for other reasons, we have a lot of reason to look into it, is because why would a corporation that is in, say, New York or California, why would they go to Texas to seek protection with this judge? Well, they go there because they know they've got it wired. Kirkland Ellis handles these massive cases. Every major case that was a complex case, according to what's reported, those cases ended up in front of him, or they ended up in front of this Marvin Isger, that's, I'm sure, also under investigation. But I don't think this ends well for people who did that, because when discovery takes place and you start asking questions, well, who did you talk to before you came down here to Texas to do this? What people did you talk to? Did you talk to people who knew Freeman? Did you talk to people at Kirkland Ellis? Who did you talk to before you made the decision to travel from Portland, Oregon down to Texas to bring a case like this?
Well, and we've seen big, like Johnson & Johnson, I think is a great example with the Texas two-step, because that's what it's called when you go to Texas and do this. Mm-hmm. But Johnson & Johnson went down to Texas to file their bankruptcy claim while they were trying to avoid, paying out victims from the lawsuits that had already been won. So Johnson & Johnson's a great example. You could have gone anywhere. Why'd you pick Texas? That underlying question, to me, is almost, why was he so corporate friendly?
Yeah.
He doesn't just do it because out of the goodness of his heart, I love corporations so much. There's a missing piece somewhere.
Well, he loved Freeman so much. This Marvin Isger apparently cooperated with Judge Jones in covering all this up, right? Do you know that part of the story?
I haven't seen all that.
Yeah, you had documents that were out there that they sealed. And they sealed them for more than a year, so nobody would know about it and they could delay this taking off. This case, to me, I think it's just started.
Yeah.
And I think even with this Department of Justice, they're going to have to do something that is that's substantial. I don't think you just say, well, this is a bad bit of history for the bankruptcy business, and we're just going to move on. And you know, what I find amazing is Judge Jones's lawyers are arguing that he had no duty to disclose. I mean, that's literally, he had no duty to disclose that he was having sex with this woman. Wasn't he paying her money too?
She got, he was directing all the fees towards her.
Okay.
From all these law firms that she was bringing in, so she would get, you know, percentages for doing nothing more than saying, "Hey, come on down to Judge Jones here."
Yeah.
That was, you know, one of the things initially reported by ProPublica was how she would get the kickbacks off of that.
Wow, where does this land?
Hopefully in prison.
Yeah,
I mean, that's where I would love to see it go.
We've never seen the Department of Justice throw white-collar criminals in prison, but maybe we will. A popular birth control that is used by over 70 million women each year has been linked to an increased risk in developing potential fatal brain tumors. But the company behind the product hasn't been honest about the side effects of this medication. I saw this article on Depo-Provera, okay? We're actually handling the case. And what's missing in this article is that Depo-Provera was testing this product down in the Sudan, Africa. Back in the 60s and the 70s, they were testing it in Kenya, Zimbabwe, all over the sub-Sahara Africa. And you know what? Women were coming up with brain tumors and dying from brain tumors, and they covered that up. That was back in the 70s and the 80s. They didn't disclose to those women that the Depo-Provera would do that, and they didn't. When they come back to the United States and start selling it, they don't disclose to women that these brain tumors uniquely related to this product were killing women.
And it's really unfortunate to see this too, because this is a product that has been on the market for decades. So people tend to think, okay, well, product's been on the market for decades. You know, I'll look it up. Oh, there's been no major lawsuits against them. This is clearly safe.
Yeah.
And so they take it. It's 4 shots a year. It's convenient. You don't have to do it every day. You don't have to have anything implanted or removed. This seems like such a good deal if you're a woman on birth control. And it only seems that way because, as you pointed out, these studies that the company conducted themselves were not made public. None of this was revealed.
They were experimenting on human beings in the sub-Sahara. That's what was going on. Let's see what happens. So they saw what happened. Yeah, it'll kill people with brain tumors, and they still didn't disclose it when they started focusing primarily on the West. I mean, a typical case, the case that was brought, the woman started using the product, I think 1995, started developing all of these symptoms that were indicative of brain tumors, had the brain tumors removed. She didn't know, because nobody told her, don't start back on Depo-Provera. So she started back, and everything got worse and worse because there was no disclosure, and they knew clearly. There was no question, Farron, that they knew exactly how this would go about killing women.
Well, and the woman in question, the woman who filed this initial lawsuit here, when the brain tumor came back, it not only came back faster and larger, they assumed, the doctor said, okay, obviously we're dealing with some type of cancer here. She went through, what, 40?
Yes.
40 radiation treatments, which if anybody has known anybody that's gone through that, it is hell. So she goes through 40 of these treatments to try to get rid of these tumors. All the while, if this company had been honest and forthright, they could have said, hey, just don't get this shot again. Remove the tumors, get off the product.
They didn't
even
tell the doctors. The doctors didn't know about the clinical results in the sub-Sahara that took place in the 70s and the 80s. They didn't know these women were dying of brain tumors down in Africa. They kept it all quiet. And so how could a doctor even know that? So the doctor didn't even know. The doctor treating her had no reason to know it was related to Depo-Provera.
Right.
And so this case, we're going to bust them up. We are going to rock their world, I promise you. We're getting these cases in record numbers. I think there was like 70 million women that have used this birth control. It's an ugly, ugly story. Hillary Clinton's back in the news, this time calling for stronger regulations for the media, especially social media. But what she isn't mentioning is the fact that her husband actually signed the bill that gave online media companies a free pass to do this, 230. Bill Clinton, Bill Clinton actually gave the social media this immunity. It's called 230. He did it because he thought he was going to get some good press after the Lewinsky disaster, right? Yeah. He thought they were going to be kind to him. They weren't kind. It didn't work for Bill Clinton. But she comes out and she says, this is the worst thing that's ever been done. How have we allowed this to happen? Well, you might want to ask hubby about how it happened.
Yeah,
right?
and she specifically called out Section 230.
Yes.
Without, I mean, look, if you want to know about it, go home and say, Bill, while we're here, let me ask you, why the hell did you do this?
Right, 1996 he did it.
So she knows full well that her husband is the one who put this in place. And so it is weird that she is on this crusade because some of what she says is correct. We do need stronger controls, but unfortunately not the controls that she wants. This is the person who just a month ago told us anybody caught spreading what she considers Russian propaganda should go to prison.
Yeah, in other words, if we do a story and it says anything like Ukraine, we say Ukraine's a big mistake for the United States. Well, that's Russian propaganda. You know, basically that's the argument. That's the kind of argument she's making.
Yeah. So she is so... She's right and still so wrong about this because this is a personal vendetta.
Yeah.
She is still upset about the 2016 election. She thinks that Russia buying $100,000 worth of ads on Facebook.
It was 175.
175. Yeah. Well, okay, then in that case, they absolutely
had to be
did.
100%. Yeah.
But she still wants this control because she wants all these bad people that went against her silenced. It's a lot like Donald Trump who wants to silence opponents.
Why is she even around? Why is she still relevant? Why do we have to listen to her anymore? It's like that child who can't go away. You know, she's lost, and you say, Hillary, you lost because you were a bad candidate. You lost because you had bad people running your candidacy. You lost under impossible odds. Who in the hell would lose to Donald Trump? But you did it. And it's almost like she can't get that out of her head, so she just won't go away. The other thing I thought was interesting is there's no mention about the fact that Cory Booker just 1 month ago on deepfake, right?
Oh, yeah,
Cory Booker, one of her best pals, he's the guy that said, I'm going to stop the deepfake legislation that would make it illegal to use deepfake kind of process, right?
Yeah, to protect children.
To protect children.
I mean, it's so much worse.
Yeah.
And so you do have this kind of weird gaggle, unfortunately, on the left here that definitely says they want some kind of protections, but the protections they're pushing are not what are needed, and they don't seem to have the right motivations for it. It's so weird.
If you ask most people on the left right now that have come up through school, maybe they didn't, I don't know, they didn't take civics. I don't know what course they missed in school, but to them, censorship is just okay. It's fine. It's like they never read George Orwell, right? They never read Kafka. They never read all these wonderful, brilliant thinkers that always talked about how dangerous censorship is. That's what she's talking about. She is a pro-censorship nutcase. And that's what, and apparently that has some appeal to the left right now. I mean, that's the only way I can say it. Maybe to the right too, I don't know. Go ahead and tell me.
I mean, we definitely see it all the time on the right. Donald Trump is already threatening to take ABC's license, CBS's license, with Elon Musk banning Ken Klippenstein.
Yes.
So I don't think anybody at this point has any kind of moral high ground on the issue
in other
of
words,
censorship.
there's not a blue line there at all. It's both sides.
Right. We want these people censored, but we want these people censored.
Real quick before we go, I caught the news this morning. I remember her statement about deplorables and how it just jazzed up voters to go out and vote against her. Yesterday, or sometime this week, Biden goes on and he calls half the voters in the United States garbage. Did you follow the story?
Yeah, I've seen that, and I don't disagree with him. Absolutely. This is in response to the Tony Hinchcliffe comment
All right.
about the floating island of garbage. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, right.
And Biden's comments were actually slightly taken out of context from a much bigger point where he goes on to talk about the attacks on the Latinos and people of color that we are seeing from there. And not to mention, we got a guy Donald Trump, who has said that Kamala Harris is retarded. Yeah. He has said that everybody on the left is the enemy within. We're evil. We're losers.
Right.
We are communists, Marxists, social. So the name calling is bad.
The name calling has gone crazy.
But for the MAGA world to act like, oh my God, we're so offended right now. Have you heard what's come out of his mouth?
But he did call them garbage. All I'm saying is, what is the effect of that? Okay, we saw it with the deplorables.
Yeah,
people were pissed off, and they said, "By God, I'll show you who's deplorable." And I think the same thing's going to happen here. I'll show you who's garbage. I mean, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong here because it's on both sides going on. But the net effect, I think, is substantial. If you want to know the truth, I think this idea of what was George Lopez that called Mexican thieves the same week that the comedian said that Puerto Rico was garbage, though that's just almost become the norm, right? It's almost, we expect it every day now. It's just part of what we turn on the TV, read the newspaper. It's kind of crazy talk we see every day.
Well, because there's no statesmanship anymore.
Yeah.
There really is no, let's sit down and have a rational conversation. It's the outrage machine.
Fair.
And we've seen this we've covered it for decades here.
Oh, yeah, we have.
You've got, if you want to be in the news, you have to say something crazy and insane. Otherwise,
that may be it.
You don't get the headlines.
That may be it. Does Nazi, fascism, Hitler, do most people even know what a fascist is? The fascist thing has been used to the hilt, and I don't know what kind of effect it has. What do you think? Do you think the average person says, oh yeah, I know my history, and I'm seeing this replay itself?
There was a poll I covered a couple days ago. 50% of the country, when presented with the definition of fascism in this poll, 50% said, yes, that applies to Donald Trump.
Yeah, when they know what it is.
Yeah, when they explain it like this is...
The other part of it is less than 25% even know what it is. I mean, it's that bad. But somebody's told them, yeah, fascism, Hitler, Nazi, and I just think it's not resonating because, by God, both sides need to talk about substance. Get back to the fact, why should we elect you? Not because you're calling, what do you call, you say he called Harris retarded.
Yeah. and he repeatedly calls her low IQ and all these things.
In what world did that used to work in? I mean, as you and I were growing up, what time can we ever even say, yeah I remember that happening? It's just that crazy. I don't know, man.
Maybe it'll be over in a week. We don't even know if it will.
If Trump loses, maybe it all goes away. You're thinking Harris is going to win. I'm not so sure. I think it's a close race.
Oh, it's very close, no matter what. Yeah. But I still think she has an edge. The polls that came out this morning in Michigan finally have her 5 points ahead.
Wow.
She's made huge inroads with black male voters and the youth vote.
Yeah.
So we will see, but I think the last month in general with the hurricanes, that kind of devastation, craziness, I don't know.
In other words, your instinct is telling she's going to win. That's instinctively, that's what you feel.
Yeah. Okay. But again, I don't want to say I know it's going to happen because there's too much weirdness in the country.
I don't even look at polls anymore. I mean, really. I mean, like you say, she's 5 ahead. To me, a poll is meaningless because it's driven by such sometimes maliciousness, sometimes just absolute poorly done, so you don't even know what to expect. Farron Cousins, it's thanks for joining me, okay?
Thank you.
That's all the time we have, but all these segments will be posted right here on this channel in the coming week, so make sure you subscribe. I'm Mike Papantonio, and this has been America's Lawyer. We tell you stories every week that corporate media won't tell you because their advertisers don't let them. If they do tell the story, the advertiser's going to pull the money. Or they're so tied into a political party. They're so Republican or they're so Democrat that they can't color outside the lines and actually tell you the story. We don't have that problem here, as you can tell from that last discussion we just had. Thanks for joining us.
that it had helped dirty money flow through its branches around the world, including at least 800...
Plaintiffs allege that the defendants provided money and medical goods to terrorist groups Hezbollah and Jaish al-Mahdi.
This is a well-organized business for these individuals that carry out these attacks. Terrorism is a business, and they run it like a business.
They knew about what was going on for a decade. They absolutely, no question about it, knew that HSBC was washing money. They had every reason to understand it was for terrorism and it was for drug cartels. Took no action whatsoever.
These banks are involved. Their accounts are connected, and they're using them to mask the transactions. The more complicated they can make the transactions, the more distance they can put between the bad guys and the seemingly legitimate purpose of these funds.
They pay $1.9 billion, which is a drop in the bucket compared to what they've made, and nobody goes to prison. These CEOs, these bankers that made this decision, they're safe at home. They know what they've done. It's resulted in the death of Americans, contractors and soldiers, not just hundreds, but thousands. And we look the other way because they don't look like criminals. The die is cast. The people that are responsible are on Wall Street.
And they don't look like criminals. It's almost a suspension of disbelief. Sometimes I'll have people call me and say, is this real? Do they really get away with this? Yeah, they do.